recorded on this computer. Okay, we've got there. I can give you a nice little intro if you like.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
I looked up your LinkedIn account, so I thought, okay.
Oh, there you go.
Naturalist with the MDC for the last 3 years. You were statewide cave ecologist. I've never heard of that before, but that seems pretty freaking cool.
Yeah, it was really fun.
You did that for almost 7 years.
Yeah, 6.5. Yep.
Bachelor's, master's in wildlife biology from Missouri State.
Wow.
Yep.
Cool.
I had something like that. So we've got some pretty impressive credentials here. That's probably why there's such a draw factor. So I will let you, give me just a second here to let 3 more people in here real quick, because I don't want them to miss out on the presentation. And Brenda.
Bob, can you put us all on mute, or should we ask everybody to put themselves on mute?
I can do that. You're right. Let me.
Yeah.
Don't unmute. Don't mute Shelly, though.
I've got to join or not.
Yeah, if you would, Elaine, if everybody could put themselves on mute. I don't know if I can do it. Oh, I can mute all, and then unmute Shelly.
Good.
Mute all.
What the heck?
Yes.
Hi, everybody.
Mute all. Mute them all. Shelly. Oh, shoot.
I got it.
All right, good. All right, you got the floor.
Okay, I can start then?
You sure can. You can share
Okay.
if you wish. And
Let's see if I can share my screen. Can everybody see this? Nod your head. Okay. All right, perfect. Okay, so this is a presentation I did for our volunteers, and this is also a presentation I'm going to be doing for the public as well, for a virtual presentation. So there's some slides I'm going to be skipping because you guys already know about Powder Valley and MDC, so I'm going to skip those 2 slides. Welcome. Okay, so these are the slides I'm going to be talking about in my public presentation. You guys are already familiar with MDC and Powder Valley, and if you're not, just let me know and I'll go to those at a different time. But okay, so what are bats? They're the only truly flying mammal. And also let me know if I'm talking too loud or not loud enough, and if there's any noise background. Good, okay. So bats are the only truly flying mammal. They're not like a rodent, or a rat or a mouse. They're their own order. They're Chiroptera, which is Megachiroptera, where the flying foxes, and the Microchiroptera, which is what we're going to focus on mostly. So this is kind of the stuff. I don't think we have a chat box. Well, we might have a chat box, but this is a public program, so I would ask, or you guys can jump in. What do you think chiroptera means?
trying to find my unmute. Am I muted yet or not? I guess
No, I hear you.
Oh, very good. Well, Cairo, I'm thinking back, so large back terror of the earth. I don't know.
Okay, that's a good guess. So
Optera wings.
the what?
Optera, isn't that wings?
It is.
Flying.
Close.
Is it Cairo spine or something?
There we go. So you guys are very close. It means hand wing. So if you would take your hand and go like this, well, hold on. I'm not used to these things. Like this, the thumb, if you see the bat, the thumb is the top right there, sticking out, and then its little fingers. The first finger and the second finger here are fused together, and then the other 2 point down like that. So hand wing is Chiroptera. All right, and then bats are not blind. Everybody sometimes has a misconception that bats are blind, but they can actually see very, very well. One really cool thing, I caught a bat one time that had 1 eye, and so she relied on echolocation, but at the same time she could see very well. And flying foxes will use actually their eyes instead of echolocation. So echolocation, ultrasonic sounds are produced by the bat that bounce off the prey. So you can kind of see that the moth will produce this vibration and the bat will be able to detect that. And each bat can figure out, based on their ears and their nose, they kind of have different ears and nose shapes to figure out what kind of prey they eat. And echolocation always helps them find their way in the dark too. If you want a really cute video for kids, you can go to youtube.com and just look up bat echolocation, and it's a really cute little video that's really neat. So this is kind of really cool because each bat has its own frequency. So I can take this bat detector, and of course I forgot all my bat detectors at the office, but you can take this bat detector and you can put it outside at night, and it'll actually detect the bats flying over, and each bat has its own frequency. So right here you're looking at a red bat. No, you're looking at an Indiana bat here. But you can tell based on the frequency and the shape of the frequency what bat you're looking at. So you might not be able to hear them at night, but you can use this information to figure out what's flying over your area. So bats are old. How long do you all think bats have been around? You can just take a guess. You don't have to type your answer in a chat box, but.
Millions of years.
Millions of years. Okay, good. So this particular bat fossil has been found in Wyoming and is estimated to be 52 million years old. So this is a type of free-tailed bat, and you can see it on display at the American Museum of Natural History. So they've been around a long time. And what about bats? Bats come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. How big do you think the biggest bat is for wingspan? Compared to a bald eagle, I guess.
Well, from the picture, it looks like the wingspan is about 3 to 4 feet.
Okay, so that's one that could be 3 to 4 feet. How big do you think the biggest one is?
I've seen some in Australia that probably reach 6 feet at least.
Yeah. So 6 feet is the largest wingspan of a bat. That's a big bat. Flying foxes, the Malayan flying fox is the largest with a 6-foot wingspan. And the smallest bat is this little guy here on this person's thumb. It's the bumblebee bat, and it is about 1 inch long. So he's tiny, tiny, tiny bat. And they eat all sorts of stuff. I put a 5-foot wingspan on there because I think it was like 5 point something feet. It's almost 6 feet. But they eat all sorts of really cool things. Bats eat bats. Bats eat bugs, fish, scorpions, nectar, frogs, and of course even blood. So like the vampire bats are not in the United States. The closest we have is in Mexico. But they actually don't suck the blood. They bite a wound or bite skin of like a chicken or a cow, and then lap the blood up. So they don't suck the blood, but they lap it. And some bats eat fruit, and there's that one in the lower left is a fish-eating bat. Okay, so do you think all bats live in caves? No, right. Awesome. So some of the areas that bats live, they live in tree cavities. They live under the bark of trees. They live on the ground. They live in barns, houses, man-made structures such as storm sewers, bridges, houses, attics, you name it, they're not really picky. So a really cool thing about bats is that they do fall swarming. And they congregate at cave entrances and find mates and mate. And then the females store sperm throughout hibernation. And the females will actually fertilize their own eggs as they emerge out of hibernation. So it's called delayed fertilization. So bears have delayed implantation, where they delayed the implantation of the fetus, but bats have delayed fertilization. So when they emerge out of hibernation, they store or they fertilize the egg. And gestation is around 60 days. And I should say, is there any questions so far? I don't know. Anyway, let me know if there's any questions, and feel free. This is a, Okay. All right. So bats, bats don't really sleep. It's called torpor, where their body temperature decreases, their metabolism decreases, and their heart rate decreases. So this happens during the daytime when they're at rest. This can happen in the summertime and the wintertime. Hibernation is just extended state of torpor, so it happens for multiple days. But they will come out of hibernation every 7 to 10 days to drink or switch around places. All right. So, any questions thus far about just bats in general?
Shelly,
Okay. Yes.
did I hear you correctly to say that bats will eat other bats?
Yes. Yeah. So there's been mostly in the tropical areas where there's the carnivorous bats that can eat other bats, but there's been a weird couple incidences of our own hoary bat somehow eating a tricolored bat. We don't know why, but it's kind of a weird thing. But anyway, but most of the time it's the carnivorous bats in Central and South America that will eat other bats or frogs or fish or whatever.
So Shelly,
Yes.
this is Donna. I have a question.
Yes.
So the question I see in this picture that there's a whole bunch of bats all kind of clumped together.
Mm-hmm.
And so you said that they come out of torpor every, say, 2 weeks. So will they shuffle so that the bats that are on the outer edge of this clump, will they move to the center of the clump and they'll rotate around?
Yeah, that's the thought. And there's been some studies that have shown that some of them will do that to switch the areas because the center of it's going to be warmer than the outside. So they do that. How often, I don't know, but they do that. So, okay. So how many species of bats do you guys think we have in Missouri? Any guesses?
8.
8. Okay. So we have double that.
Oh.
We have around 16. So this here is not really up to date because I put quote common on there, but no bat is really common anymore. But we have 7 that are or at one time common species. We have 2 federally endangered species. We have 1 federally threatened species. We have 4 that are rare, 1 historical, and 1 accidental. And I forgot to add the slide on the accidental. The accidental bat is the Brazilian or Mexican free-tail bat that are known from like Austin, Texas, with the big bridge of bats flying around. Sometimes we get those here. We have, if I can find her. There she is. Okay. We have we had one in a shipping crate out of St. Joe. And she was an educational bat for about 3, or he, I think it was a he. He was an educational bat for about 3 years before he passed away. So because we couldn't release him because he was found here and we didn't know where he came from. And because of white nose syndrome, which I'll get into, he was in education for 3 years. And so when he passed, the person who had him was allowed me to take him and stuff him for preservation. So a very rare accidental in the state, but we do have a handful in the state.
So Shelly, I have another question for you. This is Donna again.
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean? Accidental, I'm thinking is we happen to get them to come in and we find them, like the one you just mentioned. But what does it mean to be historical?
Yeah, and I'll get into that too. Yeah.
Okay.
So that one I do have a slide for. So I will definitely get into that one. Okay. So the eastern red bat, and I wish I had a live bat for you, but I don't right now, but I've got a bunch of dead ones. So we have the eastern red bat, which is probably one of my favorite bats. They're fuzzy, they're highly migratory, so they're all the way up to Canada, all the way to the southern United States. And they do overwinter here in Missouri. They've got, they're called Laziurus is their genus, meaning hairy tail. So they're a hairy tail tree bat. Borealis is tree. So, but they're very cool. They wrap their little tail around them in the wintertime to keep them warm. In the wintertime, they will be in the trees. If it's above 50 degrees, they'll be hanging in the trees like this guy here, or they'll be under the leaf litter if it's below 50 degrees. And a lot of people kick them up during prescribed fire. which is really cool. And we did a project in grad school where we determined their response to fire and found out that they're pretty good at determining the fire before the fire gets to them. So it's really a really cool adaptation that they have. And they're sexually dimorphic in color. So the males are going to be like more of this rusty red, and the females are going to be this grayer
Right.
color. So it's really cool that we have a mammal that's actually sexually dimorphic. You usually hear it in birds, but not many mammals. They can have up to four pups at a time, and they're highly impacted by wind energy issues. They don't really go in caves much, so they're not really affected by white nose, but they are affected by wind energy. I'll get to that a little bit. So our hoary bat is our largest bat we have in the state. So you can see here, he's about this big. There's my hand. They have about a 12-inch wingspan, and they're chunky bats. And they are the largest bat we have. They're highly migratory, not known to overwinter in our state. They live amongst the leaves of the trees, so they'll hang there in the leaves in the summertime. Very rare in caves, and these guys are highly migratory. So they go all the way from Canada all the way down to Central America, and they're highly impacted by wind energy, big time. And so they're suffering population decreases because of wind farm. Our evening bat is a cute little guy. He's kind of looks like a little big brown bat, but they're small. They're chocolate in color. They can be found in man-made structures or tree cavities, and they kind of have a skunk odor to them. So they're kind of a stinky bat, but they're a cute little bat. The silver hair bat is a really pretty bat. It looks like almost like a silverback gorilla. So they've got that frost on them. They're highly migratory as well and affected by wind farms. They're a species of conservation concern in Missouri only because we don't know a lot about them, although recently we've discovered that they have been breeding in Missouri. So there's been some young caught in the state. And the reason I have pictures of insects down there is the Hymenoptera, the ichneumon wasp, and the crane flies are some of the species they eat during the winter time. So it's kind of a cool, they are a winter resident here, and will be active on warm winter nights. So those are some of the insects that they found that are in their diet. The Seminole bat it looks like a red bat, but it's mahogany in color. And they're really rare. They're only found in kind of the southwestern part of the state. Only a handful of records. I've seen one in the state, and that was in Butler County. And but they're a really cool bat. They're mostly a southern species that likes to hang out in Spanish moss and live oaks. And so they're a really rare bat, but they're a really cool bat. Our Raffinus big-eared bat. I say all these are my favorite, but this one probably is my favorite just because the ears on them. I mean, they are so cool. They've got 1-inch ears, and when they're relaxed, they curl up like ram horns. But there are very few known records. They have the swamps and bottomland forests of southeast Missouri. They like tupelo and cypress trees, although they'll roost in man-made structures and caves in other states. So remember in the beginning, I talked about how bats have different ears and nose structures for their food. What do you all think this guy will eat? They're all insect eaters, but what kind of insects?
Mosquitoes.
Mosquitoes, maybe.
Beetles.
Beetles, maybe. This one actually specializes on moths. Which is kind of cool, but if you find any of I mean, they'll probably eat other insects too, but if you find a big-eared bat colony roost, you'll see the moth clippings down below where they're roosting. They feed on those moths. And yeah, all bats in Missouri are insect eaters. They might eat a few mosquitoes here or there. It's just really hard to tell on their diet just because they're it's so small. That the exoskeletons are going to be hard to determine in the diet, but they do eat some mosquitoes, and some other bats will eat other insects. But yeah, these are definitely a moth specialist, so they're a really cool special bat. There's only been a handful of records, and I've seen a few of those handful of records, just because we don't get down there very much to actually trap the bats down there. And so related is the Ozark big-eared bat, which is the historical one to the state.
Oh.
And they're historical because it's a federally endangered species and it hasn't been seen in Missouri since 1970s. Although a friend saw one in a cave in Stone County several years ago, which it's unmistakable. I mean, they've got the big ears. And so, but when we went back to trap, we were unsuccessful in trying to get it, and she was not able to get a picture. So they've got to be down there somewhere. It's just their populations are so small that they're going to be pretty scattered. They're also a moth specialist. They're a true cave bat. So like the Raffinus big-eared bat likes trees and all this other kind of man-made structures. The Ozark big-eared bat is actually going to be only in caves or crevices. And Arkansas, Oklahoma, this one here that I have in my hand, I was actually fortunate enough to get to hold one and see one, because there's only about 1,500 in the entire population left. So it's a very, very endangered species, but they're really, really cool species. And hopefully one day we'll discover them in Missouri again. So the big brown bat, and these are the most common bat we have in the state, and they have about a 10-inch wingspan. That's just half of it there. But they're the second largest bat, and they're up to 25 grams, which equals about 10 pennies. That's a fun little fact I was going to do for some kids. They're the most common bat in urban settings. So I got like 3 calls this past week about bats in houses, and more than likely they're all going to be big brown bats. But they love the old houses, the brick houses. They have attics, they have barns. They do naturally roost in man-made or in hollow trees. They'll have pups, 2 pups every year, potentially every year, and they're just a really cool bat. They're kind of these guys actually specialize in eating beetles. Oh, and cool. Yeah, so these have these big chompers. Same with the hoary bat. Hoary bat's going to eat a lot of moss and beetles, but these have big really sharp teeth. If people ever say that, you know, they have a bat in their house and they might have gotten bit, they're going to know they got bit. And that's why I don't want to. And I always have to try to not convince people, but you know, reassure them that they would feel the bat bite them, unless it's a small child. But they do leave a mark. It's like a cat biting you. It's definitely, for such a small little thing, it's got sharp teeth. Okay, so the little brown bat, not to be confused with the big brown bat, they're not related. They're a different genus, and they overwinter in caves in these little clusters, and summer beneath hollow trees, beneath bark, man-made structures, especially barns. And these are very impacted by white nose syndrome, and their population loss in Missouri has been, you know, 80 to 90% declined in some spots, if not 100%. And we'll get to white nose syndrome here soon. But these are it's really sad because hardly anybody sees these in the state anymore. Tricolor bat, they are our smallest. So I was trying to find them. These are our second smallest bat that we have. So these are a couple examples. Whoops. Here you go. And they call them tricolored bat because their fur, if you look at their fur, it's got, I don't know if I can do it close enough. They've got 3 different colors of fur on them.
Oh.
Okay, so they call it tricolored bat. It used to be called the pipistrelle, if anybody heard the pipistrelle, but because of genetics, just like snakes and all these other things that change, they're not related to the pipistrelles in Europe, and so they completely changed the genus and the common name. So it used to be a completely different genus and common name. I still call them pips when I'm in a cave because it's just easy to say pip, pip, pip instead of tricolored bat. But they're 4 to 8 grams. They can spend up to 6 months hibernating in caves. And then during the summertime, they can be found in the leaves of trees, also some bridge structures that they like. But they are very impacted by white nose syndrome. The northern long-eared bat is here. little guy here. They overwinter in caves. They are our newest federally endangered species. They're actually a federally threatened species. And that was a lot of political stuff. Instead of endangered, it got to be threatened. But unfortunately, they're virtually non-existent in the state now because of white nose syndrome. So it used to be one of the most common bats we would catch in the summertime, and they're virtually non-existent. I think last year, I don't think anybody caught them at all in the state anymore. And so they're just virtually non-existent. But they do love to do tree cavities in the summertime, similar to these other bats. And then they'll hibernate in caves, and they love to hide in tiny, tiny crevices and tiny holes. Sometimes you'll just see an ear sticking out, and you're like, oh, that's a northern long-eared bat. So they're a pretty cool bat that's unfortunately not seen very much anymore. So the eastern small-footed bat is our smallest bat. I list it as rare on here. And that's only because their habitat, they're very habitat specific. So they're found on glades mostly, and under the rocks on glades, and very specifically on a rock under a glade, usually, or a crevice. They are found in caves. I've seen them in caves before. And our herpetologist has seen more in the state than anybody because he's out there during glade surveys and flips over rocks looking for snakes and finds bats. So, but they're a cool bat. Small bat, but they're also impacted by white nose. But because of their habitat, it's hard to say how impacted they are. Our southeastern myotis is a rare species in the similar habitat as our raffinest big-eared bat. It's that swampland southeastern boot heel part, and they're a cave bat in some parts of the country. Like Florida has a lot of big southeastern myotis caves. But here we don't have, in that part of the state, we don't have any caves. So there are very, very few records in the state, but they are down in the boot heel. And they have two color faces, gray and red. So the Indiana bat is one of our technically three, if it was our big-eared bat, but 3 endangered species. So we have or 4, I guess now, but the Indiana bat's a federally endangered species. They hibernate in these huge, huge clusters. Sometimes there's 2,500 or so in a cluster.
Oh.
And usually it's about 150 bats per square foot. So they're tightly packed in there. And all those little pink parts in there are all their noses. And I need to change this, and I keep saying this every time I give this, but we used to think they migrated from areas in southern Missouri to northern Missouri. But recently in 2012, we discovered that there's a huge hibernaculum in Hannibal, Sodalis Nature Preserve, which if you ever get to go there, it's a really cool spot. It's a mine that's got 35 different entrances, and it's got 200,000 Indiana bats in it.
Oh.
And it's the largest in the country, largest in the range. However, before 2012, they had declined about 97% in the state since 1978. And when we discovered this in 2012, there were about 13,000 in Missouri. And we went to this one room in the mine, and it had 16,000 in one room. So we were like, it was very shocking and awesome to see a new site. But however, because of this, white nose syndrome is in that site, and because of that, it's very difficult because if we lose all that population, then we lose all those numbers. So, but they do like to roost underneath the dead trees with the loose bark. And let's see. The cool thing is when we discovered the Sodalis Nature Park area, I found a band in there, and during my master's project in 2008, I banded several of my Indiana bats in Nottoway County, which is over in Maryville, and I found one of my bats hibernating in there 4 years later. So that was really cool band recovery from Nottoway County all the way to Hannibal. So that was a really cool discovery. So if this works, whoops. Well, I have to do this. There we go. Sorry, it's gonna be a little small. Let's see if that works. Nope. Okay. Well, there it goes. So this is an Indiana bat roost tree exit. So it's pretty cool because you can see the bats. Sometimes there's 200 bats coming out of these trees. but it's just a really cool. Is the video slow on your end?
Little bit.
Little bit, okay. But it's a pretty cool video showing that that's how we count those bats of those trees. Okay, so gray bats. There are other federally endangered bat. This is actually this is our largest hibernaculum that we have in the state, with 500,000 gray bats in this. So all those black dots are bats, and it's a pit cave. And it's really cool. It's really hard to count those bats because it's, you know, they're all over the place, but it's a really neat spot. They're a true cave bat. They form dense clusters in the wintertime, and they only have about 10 sites in their range that they hibernate in. And that's range wide. So Alabama has the largest, with about 1 million bats hibernating in one spot. And they winter and summer in separate caves. They're occasionally found in man-made structures, such as like dams and sewers. And right now, it's estimated we have around 800,000 in Missouri. Before white nose hit, they were going to be potentially delisted from the endangered species list, but because of white nose syndrome, we weren't sure exactly how they were going to be affected. So currently, they're still listed on here for now. But fortunately, they're actually not affected at all by white nose syndrome. Indiana bats are affected, but slower than the other species I talked about. Okay, so this is a maternity site. This is actually River Cave at Ha-Ha-Tonka State Park. So these are all the gray bats coming out. We used to monitor it by thermal infrared video. And you can just see like little popcorn just coming out. Is it really slow on that end too? Still a little slow? No, pretty good. Okay, good.
Pretty good.
Okay, awesome. So that's just a pretty cool video of those guys. Okay. So how we capture bats, we have mist nets, which are the same that people use for birds. They just have a little bit of a, depending on the size of the birds, it's a little bit bigger of a hole for the bats. This here just shows, it's a really horrible picture because it's really horrible to get pictures at night. But you can see that we try to put our nets in along creeks or flyways to get the bats to come in. And it's kind of like putting a chair out in the middle of the night. These bats are coming and going the same time every night. And so if you throw something in the middle of them, it throws them off and they get caught, because actually they can see the net very well. It just we have to trick them into getting into the net. So there you can see a bat getting into the net. And as long as you get to them in time, and you know, we check every 15 minutes, that they don't stress out too much at all. So they're pretty good. And we put transmitters on their back. This is how we able to find them. We trim their hair and then use surgical glue. And it comes off about 2 weeks, but they're tiny. So there's the transmitter size. And they lasts about 2 weeks. And so we're able to get a good enough information for them as long as we can find them. We've had several bats that we put transmitters on and never hear from them again. But it's a really cool way to find out where the bats are roosting. So there's a roost tree. This is actually when we did the bush shooting range, before it became the new bush shooting range. We tracked northern long-eared bats around the area. So bats and wind energy, just really quickly. Bats have been impacted highly by wind energy, and it's you know, wind energy is good because it's a renewable source, and a lot of people are taking the time now to work with both birds and bats on figuring out how to make it sustainable for the bird and bat populations. And so sometimes they're working to turn them off during high migration periods of time, and they're not going to put them near, like, they're trying to work with people about not putting them close to known like roost or known areas where there's gonna be high impact. But a lot of these bats not only get bats and birds, but the bats, they sometimes get hit. I mean, the tip of these can go 200 miles an hour at the tip of the turbine, and so the blades. And but also there's a thing called it's a vortex that goes at the outer, and it kind of like a big funnel. And it's called barotrauma, where the bats actually get caught in this vortex, and their lungs, capillaries essentially explode. You know, they kind of burst. You know, and so they were finding these bats without external injuries, but finding the internal injuries. So that was just a little bit about my energy on that one, but people are doing a lot they can on doing that. Now, white nose syndrome, just really quickly, I'm sure you guys have heard of white nose syndrome, but white nose syndrome was discovered back in 2007, 6-7 in Howe County, New York, where this white fungus was going on this bat. And it slowly, well, actually it's quickly progressed down, and I'll show you the map, down the Appalachians all the way through the Midwest into the Western now. And this picture, kind of a gruesome picture, is Aeolus Cave in Vermont, where there were 200,000 little brown bats that died of the virus. I keep saying virus because of COVID-19, the disease, the fungal disease here. So it's a fungal disease that the bat is only known to affect bats. It loves cold, humid habitats. So the caves here are perfect for that. And it gets on them during hibernation, and essentially the bats starve to death because they're arousing. So remember I said maybe 10 to 14 days to arouse every hibernation. Here they're arousing every maybe 2 to 5 days out of hibernation. So they're keeping that, they can't keep enough food on them during the winter time. So here you can see the map is the current, this is, well, it's not the current map, but it's close enough. But the up there in the red circle in New York is where it was originally started. And then you can, I forgot this is a touch screen, sorry. You can see that this is kind of where all these are now. And Missouri is essentially statewide in the state. This here was based on 850 sites that we had surveyed from 2010 to 2017. And you can just see kind of the progression that we had from where it started. We found our first sites up in Pike and Rawls. Not Rawls, Pike and Lincoln County, sorry. And then down in Shannon and Perry County were our first kind of sites that we started seeing stuff in. And then it just progressed towards since then. So just a bit of depressing information, population counts. These were our 20 caves. So these caves here that I'm listing, or not listing, but comparing, are ones that we've done for a long, long time. So we have really good comparison on them. But you can just see that the little brown bat decreased by 84% in these 20 caves. Our northern long-eared bat decreased almost 100%. I saw 2 bats in 1 cave of those 20 caves. And then our tricolored bat has decreased about 87%. So the Indiana bats I list as a percent change, and this does not include Dallas Nature Park. It just kind of interesting. I don't know exactly how to explain that one, besides they might be moving different sites, which happens. But you can see here that our numbers are just tanked. And the really cool but sad picture is one on the left is 2013. That site had bats all over the place. And then we went back in 2017, and you can see, I mean, we went back every year or every other year since, but 2017, there was hardly any bats in that cave. This just a kind of shows you our trend of our tricolor bats in those 20 caves. So you can just see that they started out about 1,500 and are just down to hardly anything. And there's that spike in there. 2013 is when white nose hit all these caves. And we don't know exactly what was going on, but other states are seeing the same thing. When white nose hit, there was an increase, a big spike in numbers of bats. But it could be they were moving closer to the entrances of the caves, because we won't survey the whole entire cave. Some of these caves might be 9-10 miles long, and we only survey the first, couple hundred feet. So it could be they're moving further, closer to the entrances because of the colder climates that they need, or it could be moving from other sites. So this just shows you Devil's Icebox cave trends, and it's very depressing. But you see that spike again. 2015 is when white nose hit that site, and then it just tanked. And I think that's all I have. That's my daughter. I like to take her caving when I can. So. Yeah, so any questions? I know there's a lot more information I can cover, but it's really
Shelly, what kind of bats do we typically get in St. Louis County And why is it so difficult to attract them to those man-made boxes that you always see sold in the store?
Yeah, so that's good. I didn't cover bat boxes, but yeah, so big brown bats are going to be the most common urban bat that are going to be in houses and barns and bat boxes. Bat boxes are going to be hit or miss. I'd say if you want to try, do it, but just know that it might take a while. They have to have a really good microclimate for them to like, and so it's going to be the right height and facing usually it's like at least 12 feet off the ground. The higher the better, and it's got to mimic a dead tree situation essentially. And so the ones I found likely to get occupied are those that have bats in their houses and they want to block those houses off to the bats. Then they put up these bat houses and the bats actually will reside in there. Now the other spots are you just put them up and you can hopefully you get one, you know. So it's just the bat houses are hit or miss, if that makes sense.
Shelly, this is Mary. I seem to remember an article or something that the University of Missouri was doing research on white nose syndrome, and that they were finding some success for treatments. Is that correct?
Yeah, so, and thanks for reminding me that. Yeah, so I was part of that original research stuff going on. It was from the same bacteria that ripens bananas. So it's Rhodocris, something like that. And it was very successful in treating lab bats. But the problem was that they never did a trial in a cave setting. And a lot of these treatments, I know they're working on different treatment trials in different sites. Michigan, I think, has been or Minnesota, one of the two, has been really good at doing some different treatment trials. I think Agent Orange, were people using Agent Orange at one point to try to do some different things. But the problem with a lot of this is that it's going to affect other fungi growing in the cave environment. And so it's going to be really hard to treat bats in caves. And that's why a lot of them were focusing on the man-made mine situations. But I haven't heard anything since, because she hasn't done, I don't think she's done any more of that research in a couple of years for that Rhodocris stuff. So,
okay, thank you.
There's other research going on, I know that.
This is Tara. I was wondering what sort of pollinator benefits bats in our area provide.
Unfortunately, none. Although, I guess I'm trying to think how. Well, it's kind of the opposite, you know. So all of our bats here eat insects in Missouri, and most of the United States. But if we plant a lot of native plants, it attracts all the insects. Therefore, it would benefit the bats on that end. So it benefits the pollinators and it benefits the bats on that end, if that makes sense. So.
Shelly,
Yes.
This is Carl, do they know how it started in New York, the white nose syndrome? I mean, what did it pop up all of a sudden? Do they have any idea why?
There's speculations, but nothing that's for sure. I mean, that's a hugely controversial topic, and only because there happened to be an international cave meeting at that cave, and so more than likely it was brought over by people. It had to have been, you know. A lot of people say, well, maybe it was brought over by a stowaway bat, but Howe County is pretty far from the coast, and so to have a stowaway bat get over there and all the way there is going to be really hard. So more than likely it was from a person somehow with maybe affected clothes, affected shoes. We don't know exactly, but people somehow started it. They just don't know exactly what. And that's why there's been a lot of decontamination protocols on if you go into caves, to protect your clothing and to protect everything, to clean your shoes, to clean all your gear between caves, just to be on the safe side in case it does spread human to human, or human to human. Oh my God, human stuff to bats cave. It doesn't affect humans, it's only bat. But it does spread bat to bat big time. So, but yeah, somehow it was brought over by people somehow. So.
Where did it come from?
Where did it come from? So yeah, that's a good question. Eurasia somewhere. Eurasia, both Asia and European countries, several of them have the fungus. The bat numbers in Europe seem to be very low, and so they don't know if it suffered a mortality event before recorded history. And but they seem to be coexisting with the fungus just fine there. And so they don't know exactly where it came from, but Eurasia somewhere. And our bats in New York especially has been bouncing back. The population has been bouncing back, it seems, in New York. And so, or at least they're seeing stabilization. And so hopefully hopefully we can see that in Missouri too with some of our bats.
Shelly, did I hear you say that Missouri bats do not eat mosquitoes, or you can't test for it?
Yeah, I mean they more than likely eat mosquitoes. It's just hard to tell how many mosquitoes they eat. So they're going to eat pretty much anything they can get their mouths on. But they're opportunistic feeders. However, it's like, what's going to be more beneficial for the bat? Is it going to be going after a mosquito, or is it going to be going after a big moth, So it's like eating little Cheerios, like little snacks. But so they do eat them. It's just really hard to tell from their guano how many they actually eat, but they do eat mosquitoes.
So many people are afraid of bats because they're sure they're going to get rabies. What is the incidence?
That's another good question. I need to write this stuff down so I can add more slides. So rabies is it is in bats, but it's very rare. So less than 0.5% of bats carry rabies. And more often than not, if you see a bat on the ground, it's going to be sick. It could have rabies, or it could be something else. But come in contact with a rabid bat is going to be pretty rare. So, just avoid handling the bats, especially barehanded. They do bite, and they do bite hard. They draw blood. Take it from someone who gets bit a lot. I don't get bit much anymore, but I used to get bit all the time. And I have my pre-rabies vaccinations, and I have to get my blood work checked every year to make sure I'm up to date. But yeah, it's really rare. Let's see, I've been doing bat work for 13 years, and I came in contact with one rabid bat only because we were doing research for the MU project, and we collected a bat that showed signs of rabies and ended up being positive. And so we all had to get our boosters and everything. But so that was the only time I've ever come into a known contact with a rabid bat. So it's very rare. Skunks actually carry rabies at a higher prevalency than bats. So they do have it there, but you just had, just like any wild animal, just avoid them, but definitely avoid handling any bats if you don't have your vaccinations, because it is 100%. Well, I shouldn't say 100%, but it's pretty much fatal if you get bit by a rabid bat and don't get treated immediately.
Billy, this is Bob Birag. Are bats prey to any major predator?
So that's actually brings up a good point. Our gray bats, so barn owls, their natural habitat is going to be caves, right? Caves and cliffs. And we actually had a family of barn owls in one of our caves that had a big colony of gray bats. So I had to study on that because my supervisor at the time was like, we have to remove the barn owls. I'm like, wait a minute, before we figure this out, let's see what they're eating. And so luckily I dissected all these pellets and found only five gray bat skulls out of 200 skulls or something. So it was very, very little. So things do eat bats, but mostly it's the sick and injured ones that they eat. at least here, you know. Snakes, we'll see snakes sitting on the gate of a cave just waiting for a slower injured bat come out. So there are, things do eat them. It's just gonna be harder since they fly very fast. And birds will eat them for sure.
I don't know if everybody saw that message from Brenda just now. She said, I guess great horn go after bats.
I'm assuming any kind of, in fact, oh, and yeah, I would assume that great horns would go after bats. I had a picture recently of someone sent me a picture of a Mississippi kite eating a red bat. So they do, and red bats are out during the day in their diurnal, and so if they're, I would assume if any bat is slow enough or birds fast enough to get, anything is going to get them if they can.
Wouldn't it be that? I guess that would be an interesting one, because I'd always heard, you know, one of the ways you tell a bat flying at night is they tend to dart a lot, right? They're not really a gliding bird.
Right.
I would think that owls kind of are a diving bird, that they tend to swoop in at a glide rate, and they don't dart a lot. So
right.
I think the incident would be uncommon.
Yeah.
This is Brenda. Yeah, I've seen great horns go after bats all the time. It's the most probably common predatory attempt that I see great horned owls do.
Yeah.
And I don't see them get them very often, but I do see successful attempts. So it's always exciting. It happens so fast, but all of a sudden you just see that owl jerk the other way and reach its talons out, and sometimes they get them, and most of the time they don't. But I have seen it. It's really exciting.
Yeah, I agree. I think if anything can get a hold of it, they're gonna get them. So.
Yeah, and great horned owls can fly 20 to 40 miles per hour, but it's still, they're so big they have to make that fast janking turn to get that bat, and it's complicated. So.
Yep. Yeah.
I guess that's kind of a natural defense against that kind of predation, right? If you dart around a lot, you're a tough target to hit. But
yeah,
the way they feed, right, is that darting around.
Yes. Yep.
Shelly, I have a question. You said we have 16 bats in Missouri. How many in the United States and in the world?
Let's see. There are, I think, let me look this up real quick to be on the, there's 46, I think, in the United States. In the world, there's over 1,200 species. I think there's 46 in the United States, though. But it's ever changing with all these new subspecies and subspecies, and this says more than 40. Yeah, so 40 to 46, something like that, in the United States. And then, yeah, I think last thing I heard, there were around 15 or 1,250 maybe for the the world. But there's quite a bit. Bats make up a huge portion of the known mammal species in the world for sure. And the bats actually have the largest known colony of any mammal or any animal too, any mammal for sure. I'm getting everything confused now. But the free-tailed bats with over 20 million bats in a colony. So it's huge.
Is there any bat that you commonly find worldwide, or are they pretty much have the
There's a genus, the genus Myotis can be found and worldwide, or at least anywhere the bats are found. But all the species are going to be different based on regions. So none of the bats in the United States are found in Europe, vice versa. So.
Are they seeing any impact due to climate change now? Recognizable?
Well.
Further ranging north, or?
Yeah, and honestly, I it's been kind of the past 3 years, I haven't done as much bat work as I used to do. I honestly I can't say that for sure. The Seminole bat seem to be coming in Missouri more often, which is the southern bat, but I can't say that for sure. But it seems like now people are catching them more than they used to in the past for the Seminole bat, which is, like I said, the southeastern species. But other than that, I personally haven't noticed anything.
So this is the first time I've heard somebody talk about bats were coronavirus hasn't come up, right?
Ah, yes. I was not avoiding that.
Sorry.
Yeah.
We had one speaker, I had told the chapter one time, I guess they had one speaker a couple months ago, maybe it was, out at Urban Chestnut Brewery, and had kind of gone through the whole, it was a very long discussion about bats, and at the end he kind of covered that. He said that at that time it was believed that that wasn't something that was probably found. If anything, it was, it's come from, what's the little
Pangolin.
Yeah, pangolin.
Yeah.
That might,
Yeah, so there's a lot of unknowns. There's been the virus is known from horseshoe bats in Asia, and there's also known from the pangolin. And so whether or not it came from a bat, or it came from the pangolin, or it came from the bat, then the pangolin, then the person, they don't know exactly. They still don't know exactly where it's come from in terms of like how it got from animal to people yet. However, the big issue that we're dealing with now is that we people potentially could give the virus to the bats, and so a lot of research has been on hold. People can't do a lot of trapping right now, or rehab right now, because the virus has been found in tigers, other cats, mustelids, ferrets, and mink, and then dogs. And so there's high probability that the virus could go from us to the bats. And so they're doing a lot more research. They did one study saying that there were 20 bats, big brown bats, that they did a study on, inoculated them with the virus, and they didn't shed the virus, but also was, I think, for like a 3-week period. So bats have a different immune system, so it could take a lot longer for them to shed the virus. So there's still a lot of unknowns, and we unfortunately have to euthanize any bats found in people's houses right now because of that, which luckily it's not many. I had to do my first one today, which is not, luckily it's not many, but it's just a precautionary because of the population crash that the bats are suffering. It just adds one more thing to the mix. And then they're worried about too, that if we give to bats, could bats give it back to people? And so it's just it's kind of a weird thing that it's not only tough for all of us, it's a hugely tough situation right now that we don't have any idea. Just kind of like us too. We don't really know it's a lot of unknowns. So it's a kind of a frustrating time, but they're still doing a lot of research on the coronavirus, because bats naturally carry coronaviruses, and they're different coronaviruses. So I forget if this one's a beta or an alpha virus, but a lot of bats carry the opposite. I forget, whatever one we can get, the bats usually carry the opposite coronaviruses. And so it's a lot of unknowns. So it's interesting, but frustrating. So
sure. If they do get it, it's going to be so hard to get those little masks on their.
Yeah. Well,
easier, so.
We joke around because in order to do bat research right now, you have to wear a double mask and a face shield and a big suit. So it's like, we're so a lot of people aren't doing it right now until they figure out what's going on. So
sure. Yeah, it would be so sad to see something else have an impact on their population right now.
Right.
So.
Yeah. I see a question here that said which bats are likely to be at Powder Valley, and we have red bats, evening bats, and big brown bats that we have captured and or got on our detectors. So we have at least those 3 bats. And if you just go down the street to Emmenegger Nature Park, we've had big browns, evenings, reds, and tricolored bats. So it's but that's what we've caught at those 2 spots.
For all of them, is it normally that dusk time period that you're going to see the?
Yeah, so they're going to be, we're going to be active starting at dusk, and then they'll be active for a few hours, and then probably around 11 to midnight, they're going to kind of slow down and go rest, maybe digest their food a little bit, and then go back out afterwards and be active for that, wee hours in the morning until sunrise. So it's going to be kind of they come in like little spurts. So whenever we miss net, we usually get the most around right after sunset till about 10, and then we get this huge other wave around midnight to 2 is when we usually get the biggest waves.
No kidding. I had no idea. Other questions from everybody? Yeah, this is fantastic. So much cool information, Shelly.
Well, I'm glad you guys are here because it gives me some slides that I got to add for my presentation. So.
So how do you count bats when they're so in mass, like in a cave?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So the big picture I had of that showed the cluster, we have a program, it's ArcGIS, ArcMap, that we use, and we actually upload it to the program, and we have to put little tiny dots on each of their noses, but the program counts it for us. So luckily we don't have to worry about remembering what number we're counting at. So, but those we put the dots on their noses and it counts it for us. So it's kind of nice. The videos that you saw, the bats flying, we had a program that would count it for us too. It would count all the bats going in and out of a frame that you put on. And it was nice because you didn't have to worry about sitting there and counting and clicking all the bats coming in and out. Because that's what they used to do before that program came out. They'd have to sit there and slow the frames down and count the bats coming out slowly. So our computer programs and technology has been wonderful counting all these bats for us. It's time consuming, but it's very useful.
Very good.
I have a question. I was wondering, we're doing a lot of kayaking along rivers and we see lots of little caves in the bluffs. I was wondering, you probably don't, you're not able to go into those kind of spaces, but are we hopeful that we have bat populations in those that we just haven't counted?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So believe it or not, some of those bluffs people can enter in. There's a lot of caves that you have to access through vertical rappelling. But there's a ton. I mean, we have over 7,500 caves in the state, and more than likely, some of those we don't even look at, at the right times of the year. So I'm hopeful that there's other sites out there that we haven't discovered yet, kind of like the Sodalis Nature Park. More than likely they're going to be like abandoned mines that we haven't discovered yet. They're going to have the largest populations, but there's always, I had a friend text me the other day and said there were some bats at Bagnell Dam, and she sent me this video. I was like, woo, there's a lot of bats, so there's always these caves like that are waiting to be discovered, or mines that are waiting to be discovered, that we have these populations we didn't know existed. So
any more questions?
Oh, this is Kathy. Years and years ago in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, we went into one of the abandoned mines. It's a group tour. And they were saying that they anticipate the snowfall, how many feet of snow there will be, by which date in August the bats begin to go into the mine. And you figure 10 feet normally, but they could tell if it was going to be, a 12-foot or 13-foot snowfall that year. It made a big impression on us.
Yeah, that's interesting. Too bad we can't do that here, but yeah, that's definitely interesting. So, any other questions?
All right. Once again, thank you so much, Shelly.
You're welcome.
You're welcome to stay on the meeting and listening to the stuff we cover here, or you're very welcome to go off and find the beverage of your choice. And
yes, I'm gonna go finish my dinner.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Shelley. Yeah, thank you.
Thank
And
you,
you guys
Shelley.
feel free to email me anytime you need to. So thank you.
Very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank
It's
you.
so fascinating.
Thank you very much. Thank you. See you guys later.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, I'll keep